Okay, so good morning, everybody. Well, today we plan to cover up a topic on purchase or lease decision. This is a most important decision, especially when consumers are planning to buy something, and they often have to take a balance whether they should lease a product or they should buy a product. So, lease or buy decision involves basically capital budgeting principles to determine if leasing is as asset is a better option than buying it. Leasing in a contractual arrangement in which the lessee obtains an asset from another company, the lessor, against periodic payments of lease rentals. It may typically also involve an option to transfer the ownership of the asset to the lessee at the end of the lease. Buying the asset involves a purchase of the asset with company's own funds or arranging a loan to finance the purchase. In finding out whether leasing is better or not, as compared to buying, we also need to find out the periodic cash flows under both the options and discount them using the after-tax cost of debt to see where does the present value of the cost of leasing stands as compared to the present value of the cost of buying. And then, accordingly, whatever output we are getting after the calculation, we can make a choice whether we should be going for leasing or we should be going for buying. Before I go further, I think I will also like to tell you a basic concept of capital budgeting, which is nothing but a technique which will actually allow you to describe the process by which all companies can make decisions on their own capital projects. It is not unusual for some fairly sophisticated techniques to be employed. Capital budgeting relies heavily on just a few basic principles. That is, decisions here are based on cash flows and not on accounting concepts such as net income. Moreover, timing of cash flow is very critical. Cash flows are based on opportunity cost. A comparison is made between the incremental cash flows that occur with an investment without the investment. Cash flows are analyzed on an after tax basis. Taxes have to be fully reflected in capital budgeting decisions. The financing costs are ignored. Financing costs are already reflected in the required rate of return, and therefore, including them again in the cash flow and again in the discount rate would lead to double counting. Capital budgeting cash flows are not the same as accounting a net income. In addition to the basic principles that we have just discussed, there are several concepts of capital budgeting techniques that we can include while we make a decision whether we should buy a product or we should get it on lease. So we have one concept such as sunk cost. These are the costs which have already been incurred. Opportunity cost, this refers to what a resource is worth if it is put to its next best use. Incremental cash flow, this is the cash flow which is realized because of a decision. Externality, which refers to the effect of an investment on the other things beside the investment itself. If possible, these should be part of the investment decision. Cannibalization is one example of the externality. This occurs when an investment results in customers and sales in moving away from another part of the company. Conventional cash flows versus non-conventional cash flows is another important concept that has to be understood within capital budgeting. Conventional cash flow pattern is one which has an initial cash outflow followed by a series of cash inflows. Converse, the non-conventional cash flow pattern is one in which the initial cash outflow is not followed by cash inflows only, but the cash flows can flip from positive to negative again or even change signs several times. This was a very brief concept about capital budgeting and lease and purchasing decisions, which I'm going to talk about further. Another thing which I want to discuss before I move on to the Excel sheet is the concept of certain finance functions that we have to use in doing these calculations. So the very first function that we have to use in this case is NPV function, which is net present value function. The Excel NPV function is a finance function in Excel that will calculate the net present value of an investment using a discount rate and a series of future cash flows rate. Discount rate over period value 1 minus first values representing the cash flows. In a similar manner, we have a present value function as well, which again is a financial function in Excel, which will calculate the present value of a loan or an investment based on a constant interest rate. We can see and use present value with either periodic constant payments such as mortgage or other loan, or future values that your investment goals are, right? So this is a very brief snapshot of the concepts that we have to know before we actually move on with the functioning of lease or purchase decisions in the Excel sheet. So let's go back to the Excel sheet and let's get going with the some calculations which will help us in deciding whether we should purchase a product or we should get it on the lease. So I have a very simple example with me today, wherein we are planning to buy a car,